Now, as you'll know, well, you probably are aware of this, the South African-born Hollywood movie star Charlize Theron's controversial comments about the Afrikaans language have angered many. In an interview, Theron says the language is, and I quote here, a dying and not very helpful language, and that only 44 people still speak it. Let's get reaction from the lobby group AfriForum and its head of cultural affairs, Alana Bailey. Alana, good afternoon, good evening to you. So let's just start here. Is it your understanding that Charlize Theron was being serious about these comments about Afrikaans being spoken by only 44 people, or in the context, she thought she was, being facetious and making a joke?
Yeah, probably she thought it was a witty comment to make. I think it's quite sad if you make that about your mother language, but that's her perception, and the usefulness of Afrikaans for her is her perception, so I suppose she can say that.
What about this comment makes it egregious? What makes it unacceptable?
I think the fact that she describes Afrikaans as a dying language, because as we know, it's a language that is really very vibrant at the moment. We see that people are extremely creative in Afrikaans. You see wonderful literature, even wonderful movies happening in Afrikaans. So I think she could have played a positive role and contributed to our movie industry if she wanted to, rather than to make comments like this on a public platform about Afrikaans. And I think that's why a lot of people are so upset by the comments she made.
Mm. You speak about the cultural productions and output that is in the medium of the language of Afrikaans. But I've seen some comments that say, before we all get enraged about what Charlize Theron is saying, let's look at what linguists and other people who track and monitor the usage of language, but also the affinity that people, speakers, first language speakers of a language feel they still have, and their interest in preserving and speaking it, etc., etc. I've not read the studies, I'll be very frank and upfront, but I've seen references to studies that suggest that there may be something to be concerned about subsequent current and future generations and their connection to pure Afrikaans as it should be spoken. Is there nothing in that direction that, linguistically speaking, taking away the anger and outrage of what Charlize Theron has been saying, is there nothing that we should be worried about when it comes to Afrikaans as a language?
Well, definitely Afrikaans is under a lot of pressure at the moment. The pressure has to do with especially public spaces and the use of Afrikaans in public spaces where the state is not really a friend of Afrikaans, to put it quite mildly. We made an oral representation on the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Basic Education on Tuesday, exactly to say that we are concerned about a draft bill on education that puts Afrikaans under threat in public schools. We also see that in public universities, the offer of Afrikaans as a language of tuition has been severely marginalized in the last decade. So I would say we cannot be comfortable and say, well, Afrikaans is thriving and we shouldn't be concerned at all. I'm frankly more concerned about the ideological statements against Afrikaans made by politicians and others than I am by Charlize's comments. And I think it's up to the Afrikaans community to make sure that we keep our language strong, that we keep it alive and do not allow it to stagnate, but develop vocabulary in all of the study fields in which it already is a very strong language. And that if we are pushed out of public spaces like public universities, that we create private spaces where the language can still thrive at the highest levels.
You mentioned ideological statements that you say are made by politicians. What have you made of the varied reactions to Charlize Theron's comments, especially the ones that tended to take, I don't know, a bit of a celebratory tone to them? What do you make of that line of reasoning? That sort of, I don't know, sort of in a way said, it's okay if that's the state of Afrikaans at the moment, that it's a dying language.
Well, I think it's terribly short-sighted if you have the interest of the country at heart, because about 6 to 7 million South Africans have Afrikaans as a mother language, and the stronger their language rights are respected, the better their levels of literacy will be, and the better their contribution to the economy would be. So do you want to take out, let's say, 6 or 7 million South Africans out of the economic equation, or do you rather want to empower them so that the country as a whole can benefit? And I think that's the problem, not only with Afrikaans, but with all of our indigenous languages. We are not only under political threat, but also under threat of a very strong international language, English. And if we allow our languages to stagnate and to die out gradually, we are not only going to lose that very special, diverse cultural heritage that we have, but we are also going to lose a lot of people from the levels of literacy and make them less employable than if they have access to education in their own language.
Is there, Alana, as a parting shot between you and I, is there room for a conversation about the historical context in which some of the grievances arose around the language of Afrikaans? In other words, I'm asking, what are organizations like yours with an interest in the preservation and promotion of this language and others, what are you doing to try and ensure that we have the honest conversation about, one, the dominance, the continued dominance of Afrikaans Afrikaans alongside English in comparison with other South African languages in the administrative use of our official languages, but also secondly, in ensuring that we are honest and frank with one another about a conversation that seeks to disentangle Afrikaans from the legacy of its historical and administrative use as part of the apartheid system, the abuse of Afrikaans in the administrative implementation and enforcement of the ideology that drove apartheid. I'm not seeing you as organizations saying, we get you, we hear you. Here's how we can then move from that legacy and embrace Afrikaans as it should be embraced in 2022.
Well, there have been very many such conversations, and I think we can never have too many. I think it's an ongoing conversation. There are many well-represented organizations like ILAF, like the Afrikaans Language Board, like PANCELB, who all play a role to facilitate such conversations. And we've been part of that since we were founded in 2005. So I think the platforms for speaking is one thing, but I think also we do not only need theory, we also need practice. And there we cooperate with many diverse indigenous language groups in South Africa who experience problems having their language represented in spaces, to try and find ways in which they can be accommodated to. And then we also go to great lengths to make people aware of the importance of mother language education. Because I think very often South Africans whose first language isn't English tend to think that English is the language of aspiration, and that our indigenous languages, including even Afrikaans, are inferior to English, and that we need to be English if we want to have a successful future. While from AfriForum side, we are trying to make people aware that your strongest foundation has to be laid in your mother language, and then it's easier to assimilate English or any other language in the world. And I think Charlize Theron, ironically, is proof of that.
So I take it then, Alana, from this conversation between you and I, that yes, you would rather she didn't make these comments, but you weigh what you consider to be a threat to Afrikaans to be more on the side of it being pushed out of public spaces, as well as what you call ideological statements by politicians. So I take it from all of that, this is the end of the matter as far as the Charlize Theron comments are concerned, or is there some kind of way that you'll be seeking to engage her, or, I don't know, get her to retract?
No, I definitely don't think it makes any sense to get her to retract something that she probably said as a joke, which might be a joke in bad taste. She's got her opinion about the usefulness of Afrikaans, and probably in her life and her way of life, it doesn't play a role. We see with other actors like Neil Sandilands, like Arnold Vosloo and others in Hollywood, they find the opposite, and they bring their expertise back to South Africa, and they enjoy their mother language, but they also establish a career in English. So I think it says more about her than about the language, and to engage with her on that seems to me a wasted effort, which we could rather use to help develop languages and conversations about language in South Africa, rather than to spend time and convince one person of the tastelessness of a joke.
All right. Alana Bailey, I've got to thank you for your time and your inputs here on eNCA. Alana Bailey from AfriForum, they're weighing in on the comments by Charlize Theron about the language of Afrikaans. Still